Lyra Solis had a rule she never broke. She did not look back. Not at the town she left in the middle of winter with one bag and a silence she wore like a second coat. Not at the faces of people who watched her walk out of the moon ceremony like she had somewhere better to be. Not at him. Especially not at him. She had been 25 years old the night Calum Draven stood in front of his entire court and said 6 words that rearranged the rest of her life. The hall had been full of candles and formal clothing, and the kind of reverent quiet that only happens when something important is about to occur. She had walked toward him because the bond told her to, because something deep and certain in her chest had recognized him the way lungs recognize air. He had looked at her, and then he had looked away. I reject you as my mate. She did not fall apart in front of them. She would never give anyone that. She straightened her back, kept her chin level, and walked out of that hall with slow, unhurried steps, like a woman who had simply changed her mind about staying. Nobody saw her hands shaking at her sides. Nobody was meant to. She drove through the night and crossed into neutral territory before dawn. 2 weeks later, sitting on the floor of a gas station bathroom with a small plastic test in her hand, she understood that the story was not finished. She sat there for a very long time. Then she stood up, washed her face, and drove. The town she chose was called Miran. It was the kind of place where people did not ask questions because they had learned, over generations, that the answers were usually none of their business. She found a room to rent above a bakery. She found a job at the local school, shelving books and reading to children who were too young to care where she came from. The twins arrived in late autumn. A boy and a girl. She named them Eli and Sarah. She looked at them in those first hours, exhausted, overwhelmed, and more in love than she had ever been with anything in her life. And she felt something firm up inside her like concrete setting. Nobody would touch this. Nobody would diminish this. What had been done to her was done. What existed now was entirely hers, and she would build it correctly. So she did. She worked. She paid her bills. She made friends slowly, the way careful people do, choosing people who gave back what they were given. She learned the school librarian's version of every fairy tale and read them aloud on Friday afternoons, while children sat in a circle on the blue rug with their shoes off. Eli had his father's stillness, that particular quality of calm that could fill a room without doing anything. Lyra noticed it when he was 4 months old and filed it away in a place she did not visit often. Sarah had his jaw, even as a toddler, already set, already certain. Lyra loved them so completely it made her chest ache on some mornings. She loved them in a way that had nothing to do with anything that had come before them. They were not a consolation. They were not a consequence. They were just themselves, arriving into the world already whole, and she was simply the person lucky enough to be their mother. This was the life she built, and it was a good one. Calum Draven had not slept well in 3 years. He would not have admitted this to anyone. He was an alpha king. He had a kingdom to run, borders to manage, alliances to maintain. He was not the kind of man who discussed the quality of his sleep or the strange persistent weight he carried somewhere behind his ribs that no amount of work or responsibility could press flat. He had made the right decision. He was certain of this. He told himself this with the kind of frequency that should have been a warning. His wolf disagreed. His wolf had been disagreeing for 3 years with a stubbornness that bordered on disrespectful. The animal in him had gone quiet the night of the moon ceremony and had not properly woken since. It was like trying to run with a leg that had gone to sleep. Everything functioned. Nothing felt right. He started looking for her in the 2nd year. He told himself it was a practical matter. She had been his mate, however briefly. She was somewhere in neutral territory without pack protection. It was responsible to want to know she was safe. He was lying to himself, but he was very good at it. A border scout finally brought him information on a Tuesday morning, a woman matching her description, a small town called Miran, a job at a school. 2 children. He had gone very still at that part. He arrived in Miran on a Tuesday afternoon. He found the school without difficulty. It was a small building with a garden out front and children's drawings taped to every window. He walked around the side and stopped. She was in the courtyard, sitting on a low bench with a picture book open in her lap, reading aloud to a circle of small children who were watching her with the kind of focused attention that was genuinely hard to earn. Her voice was calm. Her expression was easy. She had her hair tied back and she was wearing a dark green cardigan, and she looked like someone who had found the life she was looking for. He had not prepared for that. He had prepared for many things on the drive over. Anger, maybe. Distance. A version of her that was diminished by what he had done, that would make the guilt manageable, because at least it would make sense. He had not prepared for someone who looked completely fine. He stood at the edge of the courtyard and did not move. She looked up. For 1 second, something moved across her face. Something real and unguarded. Then it was gone, replaced by a composure so total it was almost architectural. She looked back at her children. "Story time is over," she said, in the same calm voice she had been using for the book. "Please go inside." The children began to move. 2 of them did not. A small boy had climbed up on the bench beside her and was staring at Caleb with enormous, curious, fearless eyes. A small girl had grabbed the sleeve of Lyra's cardigan and was watching the stranger with an expression of careful evaluation that was extremely familiar. He had seen that expression in mirrors. Caleb looked at the boy's stillness, the particular way he held his shoulders. He looked at the girl, her jaw, the set of it. His chest did something he could not name. A neighbor took the twins for an hour. The 2 of them stood in Lyra's small kitchen with the table between them and the afternoon light coming through the window over the sink. It was a clean, organized kitchen. Plants on the sill. Children's drawings held to the front of the refrigerator with small round magnets. "How long have you known?" he said. His voice came out much more controlled than he felt. "Since the beginning," she said. "About 2 weeks after I left." He absorbed this. "You should have told me." She looked at him for a long moment. Not with anger, something quieter than that. "You stood in front of your entire court," she said, "and rejected me. In front of everyone. With no warning, and no conversation, and no room for me to say anything at all. What part of that felt like an invitation to reach back out?" He had no answer. He was not used to having no answer. "I made a choice to protect myself," she said. "And then I had 2 children to protect. So I did that instead. That isn't—" He stopped. "I should have been part of that." "Yes," she said simply. "You should have been." She did not say it like a weapon. She said it like a fact. "But you made your choice, and I made mine. My children are healthy, and loved, and they want for nothing. I am not sorry for the decision I made." He pulled out the chair on his side of the table, and sat down, because his legs were not fully cooperating. "I was wrong," he said. "That night, I was wrong. I know. The bond never left. For 3 years, it never—" "I know," she said again. "I felt it the whole time. That was the point. That was what you did. It was not cruelty. She was not performing for him. She was simply telling him the truth, with the directness of someone who had long ago stopped softening things to make other people comfortable. It was the most honest conversation he had ever been in, and it was doing more damage than a fight would have. "I'm sorry," he said. She was quiet for a moment. She poured them both water from a glass pitcher and set his in front of him and sat down across the table. "I believe you," she said. He waited for more. "That's all I have right now," she said. "I'm not going to pretend it doesn't matter, and I'm not going to tell you everything is fine because it isn't. You hurt me more than I'm going to describe to you, but I believe you're sorry." He came back the following Saturday, and the Saturday after that. He did not bring flowers. He did not write letters or make declarations. He simply appeared, at a reasonable hour, and asked if it was all right to come in. When it was not, he said he understood and left. When it was, he sat in the living room while Eli climbed on him with no social hesitation whatsoever, and Sarah watched him from the other side of the room with her arms crossed. He was patient with both of them. He was, Lyra noticed, extremely patient. More patient than she had expected from someone who ruled a kingdom and was presumably accustomed to people doing what he said without a waiting period. He did not push Sarah. He did not perform for Eli. He just showed up and let them decide what to do with him. Sarah took 6 weeks. It was a Tuesday evening, and Lyra was in the kitchen, and she heard, from the living room, Sarah's voice asking, Can you read that one again? Lyra stopped what she was doing. She heard him say yes. She stood in the kitchen for a moment with her hands very still, and something shifted inside her. Carefully. The way you move something fragile that you have been holding for a long time. Dinner happened by accident the following week. She had made too much, and it seemed wasteful to send him home. And Eli had already declared that the big man was staying, which did not leave much room for discussion. It was loud and imperfect. Sarah knocked a cup and looked immediately at her mother. Eli explained to Caleb, at length and with great seriousness, the entire plot of a book he had heard twice, with significant factual errors. Caleb listened to every word of it like it was important information. At one point, Eli called him the big man again, because nobody had corrected him yet on what the right word was, and Caleb laughed. A real one, surprised out of him, that changed his whole face. Lyra was watching when it happened. She looked back at her plate quickly. He found her on the back steps afterward, while the twins were in the bath, and the house was loud with splashing, and Sarah singing something she was making up as she went. He sat beside her on the steps without asking. They were quiet for a while. "I want to be here," he said eventually. "I want to be here properly. I want to know them, and I want to—" He paused. "I am asking, Lyra. I'm not telling you. I know the difference now." She was quiet for a moment. "If this happens," she said, "it is not about the crown. It is not because the bond says so. It is about those 2 children in that bathtub who are going to grow up and understand what you are to them, and whether you can be someone they are safe to love. That is the only thing I am deciding." He did not make promises he could not measure. He did not tell her everything would be fine. "Tell me what that looks like," he said. "I'll do it." She turned and looked at him in the low evening light. She had looked at him 100 times before. This was different. This was her actually deciding something. "It looks like what you've been doing," she said. "Showing up. No agenda, no pressure, just being here and letting them choose. I can do that." "I know you can," she said. "That's the first time I've known something good about you." It was quiet again. The sounds from inside drifted through the walls. Sarah had moved on to a different song. Eli was saying something with great authority. "I know it's not fixed," he said. "No," she agreed. "It isn't. But I'm not going anywhere." She did not answer right away. She looked out at the small garden she had planted that spring, the one that had come out uneven and imperfect, and that she loved anyway, because she had put it there herself with her own hands. "All right," she said quietly. Not a declaration, not a promise, just a door she was choosing, for now, to leave open. He stayed until the twins were asleep. He said goodnight to each of them. Sarah allowed him to tuck in the corner of her blanket. Eli told him to come back, in the casual way of a child who has already decided the matter. He left without making it more than it was. She stood at the window and watched the lights of his car disappear down the road, and she felt the bond, that old, stubborn living thing, settle in her chest. Not with triumph, not with relief, with something quieter than that. Something that felt, for the first time in 3 years, like it might be all right to feel.